Oftentimes, we may feel like we need to be very firm in our stance in order to get our point across. We think about how we can best communicate our views so that others may understand us better. With that said, this may not always be the best approach when it comes to having others understand us. Let's think for a moment of a time when we've had this posture of holding firm to a belief or stance. How did it impact or influence your relationship with the other individual? How did it affect your interactions with them? Was it a positive or a negative experience? Picture this. You have two children playing together and they're play fighting. They're kind of growling at one another and trying to see who can be the fastest and the most scary in this play fight. As you observe them, you see that they are reaching their hands out and grabbing one another, they're kind of pushing each other around, they're laughing, they're growling. It's this whole moment of complex ideas coming together, allowing them to have fun and test their own personal limits. As the play fight continues, one of the children hits the other child on the stomach a little harder than the other child would have wanted. And so, very naturally, the child who got hit begins to cry. You walk over as a sign of your support, and as you do so, the child who got hit begins to tell you what happened, while the child who did the hitting stands there very quietly. The child who got hit very clearly says that the other child hit them, and that now their tummy is hurting. Having observed this moment from the beginning, watching them play, watching their play progress to this moment of this incident, how would you approach this moment? How would you address what this child is saying while keeping in mind everything that has happened before? When it comes to children's play, they can often get very engrossed within the moment. But then, when something comes and interrupts that moment, it's almost like a balloon popping, and everything that was inside, all the fun, all the ideas, all the memories that they had, become dispersed just as the balloon pops, and they forget everything that happened. And so, the intention that we want to bring into these moments is to help the children gather back what has been dispersed so they can understand everything that has led up to this moment, and then take that understanding to then better engage with this current moment that seems to have disrupted everything. And so, I lowered my body and looked at the child who was crying in the eyes. I said to them, "You look really sad, and I hear that you say that this child hit you. I wonder why they hit you. What were you guys doing?" And so the child who was crying, who now moved to soft sobs, said, "We were fighting." And so I said to them, "Oh, you were fighting. And so maybe sometimes when you fight, you hit a little harder than you want." This child then kind of very softly said, "Yes." And so I turned to the child who did the hitting, and I asked them, "I wonder what you were doing, because you look like you were having so much fun, but then all of a sudden things kind of changed." This child said, "I was trying to catch a monster, and so I hit them." I said to the child that, "Oh, thank you for explaining to me your idea, but it looks like you may have hit them a little too hard. I wonder if you can check if they're okay." Now, stepping back, we can very clearly see that this child is not, quote-unquote, okay. They're crying, they have sought the counsel of a teacher, and this moment that they were having is disrupted. This child ended up asking, "Are you okay?" to the other child. Then the other child sort of looked over to their classmate, then looked over to me, then finally looked at the ground, and didn't say anything back. And so I said to them, "I hear that your friend is asking you if you're okay. It's important that you tell them, because they're trying to figure out what happened. Ultimately, we stood there about 3 to 5 minutes, and we tried to get this conversation going, where this child, who did the hitting, tried to ask if their classmate was okay, while waiting for this child to respond. In the end, the child who got hit started to stare at me, and slowly a small grin started to show up on their face. I then said to this child, "Oh, it looks like you're feeling better now. Do you still want to talk about this?" And the child said, "No," and they both went over to play. In moments like these, it can be very common for us to feel like there's a problem that needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved in a very specific way. For example, this child would have asked, "Are you feeling okay?" The other child would have responded, "Yes" or "No." Depending on which the answer was, then we would continue the dialogue and ask how they could make them feel better. This way, they are taking responsibility for their own feelings, but also being mindful of each other. Granted, in this situation, that didn't happen. The children were both okay with this little semi-dialogue that we had, and they went on to go play again. This is where, as facilitators and supporters of children's interactions, we need to understand that sometimes children just let things go. They don't always hold on to things as tightly as we may think they do. In recognizing this, you're helping children develop and understand their own ways of dealing with issues. Sometimes children want more support. Sometimes children want less. Both are okay, as long as the child is taking responsibility for what is going on. As we do this, as we support children in this space, then they can continue to grow to understand how they choose to deal with problems, their emotions, their interactions with others, their overall relationships. And by doing this, children can then become individuals who actively watch, think, be.